Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Federico Simoncelli, and I'm from the Rev Storage team. And I'm here today to present you the recent work that I've been doing in integrating OpenStack Glance in oVirt. Okay. So a little bit about the agenda for today. I'll give an OpenStack overview, just to understand what that is. More specifically, I'll go over what Glance is, and after that we know what Glance is, we can come up with interesting use cases in oVirt and how to actually use these additional services to improve oVirt. Then how Glance is seen inside oVirt. It's seen as an external provider. We will see what that actually means. How we interface with Glance using the Java SDK for OpenStack. Then few of the operation that we are now supporting, like for example the Glance image discovery to list images, importing them and exporting images to and from Glance. How that is actually done at a lower level using VDSM, which actually has a new infrastructure called sharing image, okay, which allows you to upload and download images with different methods. And then we will enumerate the current constraints and limitation and the roadmap to actually improve the integration in the future. Okay, to start, we need to understand what OpenStack is, and in one sentence is a cloud computing project that provides an infrastructure as a service. It was built since the beginning for scalability, so it actually controls large pools of compute, storage, and networking resource. Well, as we see here in the architecture diagram, we can see that it's, well, already here we can see that it's composed of different small parts, for example, compute, networking, and storage. Those are subdivided again into smaller projects too. The idea here is that there are many small projects really specific into duty, and all together they work to actually implement the infrastructure as a service. It's free open source software that is released under the Apache license, and it's managed by a foundation that was established in September 2012. So now that we know what OpenStack is, at least in general, Glance is one of these small projects or components that are part of OpenStack. And its duty is to provide services for discovering, registering, and retrieving virtual machine images. Okay, it provides a RESTful API that allows querying VM images, metadata, so additional information about the images, and actually also download and upload images. Okay, these images can be intended as templates. More or less, it somehow maps to that into oVirt, even though there are some differences that maybe we'll see later on. It can also be used, and it is used in OpenStack to catalog an unlimited number of backups. And it basically, as many of the projects in OpenStack, has pluggables backend, meaning that the images that are uploaded to Glance, then they end up into different types of storages, like from the simple file system to other services like OpenStack Swift or the EC2 or anything else. So in terms of what image formats Glance supports, there are two different formats that groups of formats that are supported. Basically, the disk format, which is RAW, QCO, and ISO, which are types that we already know from oVirt. Okay, so basically, these are types that we already using in oVirt. And then there are some additional formats as well. And then there's the container format, which is something that should contain the image. There is no container at all, which is what we use in oVirt and OVF. Actually, this is not in use in OpenStack in general. I didn't find anyone that was using it, also because OVF is not a container. It is more of a definition of a VM. So probably what they intended here is OVA. Okay. Now, I read that some of you have problems refreshing slides. Is that just Deepak or someone else has this problem? Can you see the Glance image-based metadata slides?
I can see it.
Okay, so we can go ahead. Yeah, if someone has any problems with that, they can watch the recording later on. So just proceed. So the Glance image-based metadata are the metadata that is provided, the basic metadata that are provided by Glance. And as you see, they contain checksum for the image, the container format that we just explained, when the image was created, updated, or deleted. If the image is deleted, the disk format we just discussed, ID name, public. There's some kind of indication about the what type of instance of VM should use this image. There's only minimal disk and minimal RAM as a recommendation. The owner, if the image is protected, which means if you can delete the image or not. Size is really interesting because the size that is advertised here in the metadata is the size of the file. Okay, this means that it's not the virtual size that the guest will see once it will be attached to that image. Okay, so it's the actual size of the data that will be transferred from Glance to your host. This means that for the raw case, it's also the virtual size of the disk when it will be attached to a VM, but in the QCO case, it's not. It will be most likely the size will be higher. Okay, so this is something that we have to keep in mind because basically it comes back later as part of the implementation and integration. Status is active. When the image is active, it can be downloaded. And the other interesting state is queued. That basically means that there's this way of creating a placeholder for an image, meaning that you define the metadata at some point and you create this placeholder, but you don't upload the image yet. It's pretty interesting because we exploit this ability from oVirt. This means that we create the metadata at some point, but then the actual data of the image is uploaded later on, and it can be also a different peer that uploads the image. We will see that, provided that they have the authentication token. Now the Glance as API version 1 had a way to define additional properties in the metadata for the images. They were not standardized, so let's say that oVirt could have added some custom properties to these images to add some additional information, but nobody would have been able to do anything meaningful with those. Only oVirt could have understood the additional properties. Now in the Glance API version 2, some of these properties have been standardized, like for example, the architecture of the CPU, and the hypervisor type, the operating system type as well. There are a few others, not many, maybe another 3 or 4, and you can find them at the link below here. So now that we know what Glance is, we can come up with interesting use cases for integrating it with oVirt. The most basic one, the initial one, would be importing and exporting single images or templates from and to Glance for interoperability with OpenStack. Now, since what Glance provides are single images, they don't have any information, or they have little information about the VM. Each image is single. It doesn't support multiple disks. It doesn't support snapshots. Okay, so that is what you can import from Glance. To respect that, it's exactly what we should do also when we export disk to Glance. So we will export disks that without snapshots, single disk, not entire VM. This is the first initial integration. Some other use cases are unlimited number of backups for images from VM. Exactly like OpenStack does, we can also have this use case. Then also store ISO images in Glance and use them natively in oVirt for the oVirt VMs, right? Same thing here. We want to instantiate a VM. We want that VM to be connected to an ISO image that is on a Glance. That should be transparent. We should be able to pick that ISO and behind the scene, in some way, VDSM oVirt orchestrates the entire thing, and the VM boots up from that. Import and export full VM and templates supporting these advanced features like a complete VM definition, multiple disks, and snapshot. Now, I'm not still sure that all these information belongs to Glance. Probably these implementation will involve some other components in OpenStack, maybe Swift or some other places and services that are relevant to complete this operation in the OpenStack way. Now, just to I need to clarify, just to make you understand better what and how Glance works. And basically, the images that Glance provides are provided through HTTP in a RESTful way. This means that you cannot use them directly. Okay, you have always to download them or upload them, so you don't have direct access to these images yet. Okay, at the state at the moment. Okay, so the regular workflow at the moment is to querying metadata through HTTP, download these images through HTTP, upload them in a WebDAV-like flows. Okay. Now that said, as phase one for use cases implementation, we picked the first one: import and export single images or templates from and to Glance. And this is mostly what I will be discussing and covering today. So let's see how Glance is, the Glance service is seen in oVirt. While we were developing the Glance integration, the external providers came along for oVirt 3.3, which are basically the capability to interface with some additional supported services. In this case, OpenStack Image, which is Glance, Network as Neutron, and Foreman. Now, to actually define and edit and remove the providers, we have a new tab in the web admin. So we can go to the providers tab and add, edit, and remove the external providers. One of these is the OpenStack Image or Glance. Here we see a screenshot for how to define that. It's pretty easy. You just need to define a name, a description if you want. The type is OpenStack Image. Provider URL is the URL to reach the Glance service. And then you will most likely need to use the authentication, because often images are protected, obviously, by authentication, and that means that you have to provide username, password, and a tenant name. There's also a test button that you can click that will check that the connection, that not only the connection, but also the authentication is correct. You're not forced to test the connection. Basically, if you want, you can just define the Glance provider, and then you use it later on when it's available. Okay, if it's not installed yet, if it's not available at the moment, you can just define it and later on use it. But if you want to test the connection, you can press test, and you will be able to check if it's reachable or not, and if the authentication details are correct. Now, Glance as oVirt external provider, we see that the Glance domains on the left are present also in the tree, in the system trees as providers, but more interesting is to see that they're available as storage domains in the storage tab. So in the storage tab, we have the Glance domain listed, and they don't belong, the interesting part is that they don't belong to any data center specifically. That is because they don't need any kind of synchronization between action that you do on Glance, and they don't need monitoring. They don't need a lot of things that are connected to being part of a data center. And it's also really handy because you want Glance being a point of contact between two different data centers if you want, right? If you want to export and import images between data centers. So they always appear as unattached, and they're not part of any data center. Now, in some cases, we need oVirt engine to orchestrate the flows and to contact the OpenStack services directly. For example, the Glance image listing. Okay, we want oVirt engine going directly to Glance and querying for the list of images that are available. Now, the problem here is that the OpenStack clients and library are in Python and, well, pure Python completely, and they don't have additional bindings. This means that they have some additional suggested and, well, known working bindings that are listed in a page in the OpenStack site. We picked the OpenStack Java SDK as a third-party OpenStack client API library for Java, which again is also licensed under the Apache license. And basically since February, we started contributing to that, to the version 3.0. We introduced the connectors to basically strip down the dependencies because it was mainly used with Glassfish. We tried to abstract some concepts so that it could have been used with JBoss without importing any additional libraries. We also stabilized Keystone, Glance, and Neutron because those were the services that we were interested in. And we also improved Keystone authentication with token providers, something that is capable of basically caching tokens and renew them when it's actually only when it's needed. But we will see what tokens are and how that works. So the first action that we can see, that we can describe, is the Glance image discovery. And so basically selecting one of the Glance storage domain, at the bottom here will appear the images subtab, and there it will list the list of active images that are known in a known format. Basically, what happens behind the scene is that the engine, as first thing, contact Keystone. We never spoke about Keystone yet, but basically it's the service in OpenStack that is responsible for authentication. So the username and password and tenant that you provide in the Glance provider will be used here. They will go to Keystone. Engine will receive a token, and that token will be used with Glance to list the images, okay, for that user and that tenant. And then there's a little bit of so there's a question here. So if exactly there's some caching involved. Going into details, what has been done here was leveraging the caching mechanism that we have for ISO domains. So what happens is that there's a little bit of caching on the engine side, and it kind of follows the rules that for ISO domains. I think they're refreshed every 5 minutes, but when the request comes from the UI, there's a parameter that says force refresh. So basically, if you hit refresh on the web admin, then it will refresh the listing up to that moment, and cache will be flushed. So if you don't actively ask for the forcing refresh, they get automatically refreshed every 5 minutes, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then, but from REST API, it also triggers the refresh every time that you issue something like import and export. So caching is only basically relevant to make the UI faster in some cases. But let's see, and that's pretty much it. So importing. To import Glance images, it's another supported action that we implemented, and basically it's triggered selecting the images that we want to import, one or more, in the images subtab that we just saw, and then clicking import. That will display a pop-up where you will select the data center. You will have to select a data center because, as we said, Glance is not part of any data center, so there's not a default data center to use. You will pick one, and then you will select the relevant storage domain where to copy that image and the relevant quota if you're using quota. How does that work behind the scene? Basically, engine goes to Keystone again to receive a token. Then it goes to Glance to basically get the image metadata. And I see other questions, but I will hold them until the end. Basically, what happens is oVirt engine will retrieve the metadata from Glance, and it will use that both in the engine database to describe the images that is about to import, and then use part of that metadata also to create a volume in VDSM, and then issue a download image to VDSM, and the actual data transfer happens between VDSM and Glance later on. So here, engine passes all the required information to VDSM in order to download the image from Glance. This means also the token and the URL to reach the image. Why create volumes and download image are separated? Basically because create volume is an SPM task, while download image can be demanded to any host in the cluster. And later on, this can be separated. Maybe picking the host that is that is preferable to be used for these large data transfer. So there's a special case when we are importing a QCOL, because we already spoke about the size that is advertised by Glance. The size that is advertised is the file size of the image, but so we don't have any indication about the virtual size of the image. And in order to discover that, engine does not only queries for the image metadata, but it also downloads the first 72 bytes of the QCO image. This way, it will receive the QCO header, and from the QCO header, it can extract basically the virtual size of the image. And that will be used for creating the volume, and it will be also saved into the engine database. Now, the important glance images in oVirt can be found in the Disks tab. The metadata that we have been able to map to relevant information in oVirt has been mapped. Few things has been set from default, like the interface virt.io, but any characteristic can be modified later on as any other floating disk. Now you can use this floating disk that we see here and attach it to a VM, run it, or make a template out of that. The other action that we implemented is exporting disks to Glance. So to export to Glance, you have to select one or multiple disks in the Disk tab, and then again you can click on the Export button, and that will pop up a dialog where again you will have to select the destination. Here you will have suggested the destination, the Glance domains, one or more. You will select one and export these disks to Glance. So how does that work behind the scene? Behind the scene, we have pretty much the same diagram here. We have an engine that goes for authentication to Keystone. Then we already spoke about queuing an image, uses the disk metadata to create a placeholder in Glance with the relevant metadata, the name, and other information, the format about the image in Glance, and it will issue the upload image command to VDSM. Again, here it will use the token and the URL that should be used to upload the image. And the image data stream comes from VDSM to Glance. So how that's seen then later on in Glance, as we see here from the command line, the Glance tool, we have Glance image list, and we will see that block disk chain1 has been exported. We will see that has the relevant metadata and the size that had inside oVirt. So now it's exported, can be used as a Glance image by other OpenStack services. So as I said, on Vim, we implemented the sharing images API that gives the ability to download and upload an image. As argument, it takes a method argument. We'll see what that means. And also the coordinate to reach an image or a specific volume. By default, if a volume UUID is not specified, it will pick the leaf, but you can also specify a volume UUID to select one specific volume in the chain to upload that or download that into that. The method arguments are something that defines the method to upload or download the image. And in this case here, we all implemented the HTTP method, which gives the full compatibility with Glance. As we are using HTTP, we will define a URL that points to the image in Glance, and we will have additional headers, in this case only probably the X-out token, that is the token required to access that image, and the token was provided by Keystone. Okay, so now this means that VDSM gains support for Glance, because here we see an example with VDS client where we can download an image from Glance with the X-out token and the URL that points to the image. And also also the compatibility with any other HTTP server. This is an example you can download for example, the latest Fedora image for cloud directly into a volume, okay, because it's basically an HTTP image somewhere. This is not supported at all into the oVirt engine, but the VDSM API actually provides this capability. So there's a question if there's any support for direct LAN. There's no support for direct LAN in this API. Okay, so not yet. This is only for the regular images in oVirt and VDSM. So there's something else that goes on behind the scene when we download an image that is in QCO format on block domains. What actually happens is that when the request comes in from the engine, VDSM has to discover the size of the image, because when the volume is created from the engine, it's allocated only of one chunk, because that's how it's implemented the team provisioning on block domains. So on block domains, VDSM allocates chunks of 1 GB, which then will be later on extended when the QEMU process uses them. As the chunk gets filled in, it will be extended. In this case, since we are downloading the image, we know how big it is, the image, and how much we have to extend the volume. We do that. We discover the size using get, okay? Using head. This means that we are going to the HTTP server, and can be any kind of HTTP server. It doesn't have to be Glance. It's supported by all the HTTP servers. And once we have the size, we can download we can extend the volume and download the image into that volume. So that's a question. So the image format. Does Glance report the image format? Yes, it reports the format, and based on what format Glance is reporting, we can do, we know how to act, okay, because that is provided in the metadata of Glance. So in the future, what we want to do, at the moment, we are able from VDSM to stream only a single volume with no snapshots. So let's assume that we didn't have snapshots here in this diagram. We only had base volume. We were able to stream that. Now what we want to do is to support snapshot and be compliant with what Glance expects, which means standalone images with no snapshots. We need to compute the QQ cluster map of the volume chain, maybe using QEMU image. After that, we can read the clusters in the proper order, and we will bufferize them in some fashion, then compress and upload them to Glance or any other web dev-like server. This is something that can be done live, meaning that we don't need any other space on the storage. We are not copying this data anywhere else. It's happening live in memory. So we compute the cluster map, we read that in the correct order, and we bufferize and compress and stream the image somewhere else. The current constraints and limitations are that it's not currently possible to export images with multiple volumes. We saw why. This is reflective to not being able to export disks with snapshot or that are team provisioned on templates. No live VM disk export. The VM should be down, but well, obviously uploading templates is always possible. Here, maybe in the future, we will be able to take a snapshot, a live snapshot, stream the image on the base volume, and then merge back with live merge. Same thing that will probably happen with backup or live storage migration. Then no sparseness support on file domains, not yet. This is easy to add anyway. For the raw format, imported images are always pre-allocated. This is a little bit connected to compression too. Basically, the idea here is that when we receive a stream of zeros, we can seek instead of writing those zeros, and therefore we can even not only maintain a sparseness, but also forge sparseness. And there's no resume option for partially downloaded images. That comes with the fact that we don't have resume in many, in all the operation in VDSM, we cannot resume copies of volumes, for example. Same thing here. There's no resume. For the roadmap, it's pretty much what was already discussed as limitation and also use cases, but just to highlight what components are involved here. We have the engine. On the engine side, we can add additional simple operations like delete image. If you mistakenly exported an image, maybe you want to remove that, and you want to do that from the UI. Volume chain online squash to support disk with snapshot. We just talked about that. It's mainly VDSM side, and basically unlock this operation in the engine, but the meat here is in VDSM. For VDSM and Glance, upload image with compression and sparseness related to upload compression. It also maintains sparseness, which is nice. OVirt engine side, integrated upload and download via web admin and user portal. This means that if you have images on your desktop and you want to upload and use them and upload them, you should be able to do so from the web admin or user portal. You select upload, and you will be able to pick one image from your desktop and upload that into Glance or any storage domain. Then the other interesting use case that we already spoke about is store ISO images in Glance and use them for oVirt VM, meaning you start a VM with ISO images that are in Glance. And then something I think that here involves all the components, and not only Glance, but OpenStack in general, is import and export full VMs and templates. That heavily depends where makes sense to store information about the VMs. So I think OpenStack in general is involved. A little bit about the useful links and mailing lists. So there's the Glance feature page that is less updated than this presentation, but still point of contact is there. OpenStack main site and specifically Glance link there. Mailing lists are the usual, where you can keep in touch and ask questions or support, and IRC as well, as you already know. So thank you all. We can try to answer questions now. Let's see. Maybe I can try to go back